Hey everybody, welcome back to another edition of RippleLIVE, episode number 25. Mark, I'm here with Steve. How you doing, Steve?
Awesome. Good to see you, or not see you, as the case may be.
In remote locations, as usual. Hey, we talk about Final Cut Pro in motion here, and big news. So Steve, why don't you just jump in a little bit to what we're doing here?
So basically the format of the show, it's a Q&A show. It's a tip show. Basically, you put your questions in the chat and we try to get to them. And there's also a feature called Super Chat. And if you click the little $ button, you can donate a nominal amount, whatever you want. And what that'll do is put your question right to the top of the queue, and we'll answer the Super Chat questions first. And then we'll go through the other questions as we see them. I should point out that we sent out a survey to our email list ahead of time, so we got some questions ahead of time. We're also going to be answering those. And I want to, this whole show is about the update 10.4.9. A lot of new features, a lot of you had some questions, but we'll also answer general Final Cut Pro questions. It's not going to be 100% on the update. If you have something that's tangentially related, we can certainly cover that for you. If you haven't done so already, we recommend that you watch our new features videos that we have posted to YouTube. Mark's posting the links in the chat, and we're super excited. We're approaching 25,000 views for our Final Cut video. So thank you for watching that video. And so the reason that video is important is that a lot of what we're going to talk about, we're going to use those videos kind of as a jumping off point for what we're going to be discussing today. We're not going to be covering new features because we already did that. We're just kind of moving beyond that and answering specific questions that you had. And I think Mark's answering questions right now. So Mark, you want,
yes.
So you want to talk a little bit about some upgrade issues that they need to be aware of. I mean, when they're upgrading to the next version of Final Cut. I
do. 1 second. I have to post those links as separate links. I'm posting links to both our overview of the new features in Final Cut as well as motion there. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I want to just give, if you haven't upgraded already to Final Cut Compressor in Motion, I want to give you a couple tips on that very quickly. Just a couple safety things. I mean, the first thing is in the App Store, you should make sure that automatic updates are turned off. You don't want Final Cut to update automatically before you've had a chance to decide if it's the best thing to do. Usually, you wait till you're done a current project before you update. When you do update, I'll just show my screen here. I'm in my applications folder, and you can see I've saved older versions of previous versions of Final Cut. So that's the first thing I recommend you do is before you upgrade, you right-click on Final Cut and compress it. And once you compress it, you give it a name. So you can see here I've got 10.4.8, and I've even compressed the new 10.4.9. So that's my first recommendation, is do that before you upgrade. And then the other thing is you want to go to, before or after, if you go to your system preferences and you go to software update in system preferences, you'll see a new Pro Video Formats option there. And I haven't even done it yet. You can see here I've been running Final Cut 10.4.9 without doing this yet because I wanted to show you the window, because once you do, this will go away. So I wanted to make sure that back up your Final Cut. go to software update and run this to get the Pro Video formats. And then if you really want to be safe, any existing library in 10.4.8 that you open to 10.4.9, it'll prompt you it needs to be updated. So you can't go back. So if you want to be super careful, duplicate your libraries before opening them in 10.4.9. We have a video that covers all of that. And I have it right here. We did a how to upgrade video. And this was for 10.4.7, but it's still completely valid. Everything in here really applies, and it's just what I basically just said, but you could look at that, and I'll post that in the chat as well. So I just wanted to get that out of the way to make sure everybody has a good upgrade experience. And I'll post that link in here right now.
All right, so while he's posting the link, what I really want to do is go through some of the questions that we received ahead of time. The simple one, answer some simple questions first, and then get into the more demo-heavy questions later throughout the tutorial. We're going to be looking at Final Cut Proxy, some of the 3D USD 3D model features in motion. Peter, thank you for that super chat. Really appreciate that. So the first question that came up that we've noticed. This question came up quite a few times in the actual comment section of our video. And the question was, why didn't Apple include HEVC, H.265, as an option for encoding Proxy 2? Why did they pick H.264? So it really boils down to this. HEVC codec was really designed for delivering high quality video over cellular networks. So it was a bandwidth thing. We get more video. We're a video-centric world. It was really designed for that. It's a terrible codec to edit in. You need very fast machines. You need, a lot of times you need hardware decoders. And you really don't, you don't get a huge amount of visual benefit from HEVC. H.264 is venerable. It's been around like years and years, and it uses software decoding. You can run it on slower machines. It works on, across the board, all these machines. So it was a better choice for sharing proxy media, because at the end of the day, you don't know who you're going to be sharing your proxy media with. They can be on a 2011 MacBook Pro, and they're not going to be able to play that HEVC media. So it was really, I think, a smart decision on Apple's part to go with H.264 and not HEVC. Mark, do you want to add anything to that, or?
Man, I agree with that. I mean, if anybody's tried to play back HEVC or H.265 material on any Mac, it sucks. I mean, it's a difficult codec to work with. It's really a delivery codec. It's not meant to be edited with. I mean, you shoot HEVC on your iPhone, you bring it in, you'd usually need to optimize it in order to play it back. So H.264 makes a lot more sense for an alternative playback. I will also mention that ProRes Proxy, you're going to get the best playback performance on ProRes Proxy because it's an all interframe codec, intra-frame codec. H.264 depends on previous and other frames, so it's a little more difficult to play, but you can get much smaller frame sizes, and it's going to play on most machines just fine. So we just have more options now, which is really awesome.
Right, and if you absolutely have to edit an HEV proxy, I have a video on my YouTube site that shows you how to do that. You can create HEV proxies in compressor and then relink to them. So you could if you wanted to. I just don't really see the point. All right, let's move on. So let's move. One of the question was, we have a training library, and is our training library up to date? Yes, we're in the process of updating our core training to include the new features of 10.4.9, and if you already own that, it's going to be in your library for free, and there's no upgrade. It'll just, all the changes will be in there. So I wanted to point that out. Okay, so what I'd like to do now is kind of get into the proxy workflow. What's going to happen is Mark's going to be monitoring the chat for questions as I'm demoing, and then when I come back, he'll probably deal with some of those questions because they'll probably be coming in. So what I thought I'd do is walk through some proxy workflows and deal with a question that has come up quite a bit about Final Cut and how it actually displays the proxy resolutions when working in Final Cut Pro 10, and then how you would set up your library if you wanted to share your proxy media with a remote editor. So I kind of want to walk you through the steps of that, and that's what I'm going to do right now. So I'm in Final Cut, the latest version, and I'm going to go to a keyword collection where I have a number of Blackmagic. Actually, let me turn off the overlay really quick. By the way, this question came up. All you need to do is turn off the overlay, is choose Show Custom Overlay, and check it, and the overlay goes away. Okay. Now, these were all shot with a Blackmagic Cinema Pocket 6K camera, and I just want to, because we get this question constantly. You can't deal with Blackmagic RAW in Final Cut. If you need the raw metadata settings, you have to open it and resolve if you need to adjust it. Then you batch render them out using their deliver page, and you create ProRes Proxy Media. Like, that's exactly what I did. That's what I have here. I don't feel like it's any big deal. I mean, because I'm going to be applying a LUT, or I'm going to grade it anyway, so it's going to come in flat, and that's what you're looking at. You're looking at flat footage. So here I have these Blackmagic clips, and what I want to do is I want to hand these clips off to Mark, but only give him the proxy media so he can work with in the Bay Area where he is. So what I do is, of course, I'd select all the clips, and I would transcode, and just to save time, so you have to do this. Notice I can't transcode because I've already transcoded them, and if clips have already been transcoded, you won't have the option to transcode them again unless, like you learned in Mark's video, you deleted that proxy media first, and then you could transcode. So just wanted to point that I've already done that. So I have proxy media, and by the way, I rendered the proxy media in 50% H.264. So these are 4K clips, so they'll be 1920 by 1080. He'll be getting 1920 by 1080 media when I send him my library. So what I'm going to do is go to the File menu, and I'm going to choose New Library, and I'm going to call this Mark Edit. So I know that's what I'm going to send him, and I'm going to click Save. So now, perfect. Now, I should point out that all of my media, my original media, is external to the library. It's not inside the library. I want to give Mark also an external library. So when he opens the library, it's relinking to a folder outside of the library. So what I'm going to do is, with that library selected, under the storage location section of the inspector, I'm going to go to Modify Settings, and under Media, I'm going to go and choose, I'm going to click Choose, and I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to call this Mark Proxy. And I'm going to click Create and click Choose. Click OK. Great. The library is now set up. Now what I do is go back to my original library with my Blackmagic media in it, and I'm going to select all of that media. And I'm going to drag this media into that Mark Edit library event. When I do that, I'm going to get a window, and you should already be familiar with this window. I'm only interested in copying proxy, because you did notice that I didn't copy the original media. It's saying, oh, I only see proxy media. That must be what you want to move into Mark's library. And yes, but here's the thing. Down here, this is a very important checkbox. Copy media in external location. If I want his proxy media in the folder that I just created, that box has to be checked. If not, what's going to happen is library is just going to have what's called symlinks, so basically the aliases. And then when he gets a library, everything's going to be offline. So that box has to be checked in order for Final Cut to take that proxy and move it out of my library into this external folder. Okay? So that's very important. Now what I'm going to do is click OK. And it's going ahead and it's doing all its copying. Of course, it's offline, and you get a bonus question. If you guys could tell me why it's offline, I'm waiting. Oh, okay. We don't know it's offline because under the View menu, we're set for viewing Optimize Original. So if I go to Proxy Only, bada bing. So now I'm looking at proxy media that I put into his library. It's offline down here because I'm looking at a project from the original library. So I've got Mark's media right here. Now, this next thing I really can't stress enough. This comes up a lot. It came up on Twitter yesterday, and there's some confusion about what Final Cut is actually showing you, and I need to really hammer this point home because it's super important you understand this. Notice that when I select a clip in Mark's proxy library, when I look at it in the info window, it says 3840 by 2160. Okay, wait a minute. Didn't you just tell me you rendered the proxy in 50%? Yes, I did. In fact, if I go to the clip and I go reveal proxy media in Finder, you're gonna see that this clip is actually 1920 by 1080 media. So it is actually half, exactly what I wanted, but yet Final Cut is displaying it as 3840 by 2160. That is by design. And you want it to, and the reason Final Cut is treating this proxy 50% as full 4K is it will prevent conform errors on Mark's end when he works with it. Because the last thing I want is him to send me back a library where his project is conformed to 1920 by 1080. Then I have to do all of this resizing. So it's a problem. So what I'm saying is this is really brilliant what Apple has done. It's like they're treating it as I have original 4K media, even though I don't. So with that said, what I'm going to do is go over to this clip, right click on it. I'm going to choose new project. And notice Final Cut, when the project window comes up, it says, oh, that's 4K media. It's 3840 by 2160, even though it's not. It's okay. So I'm going to type in Mark rough cut. And I'm going to go ahead and click OK. So now I have this clip in here. In fact, why don't I just do this? I'm going to select all these and I press E. I'm going to append them to the timeline. And now pretend I'm Mark. I'm actually I'm up in San Francisco, up in the Bay Area. I'm doing edits. I'm actually going to do some quick edits. I'm going to move some stuff around. Just do that a little bit. I'm going to add a title. Control T. Actually, oops. Well, I obviously wanted a transition there. Control T. I'm going to add a title. Oh, and most of all, maybe I want to add in an effect. So I'm going to go video. I'm going to throw an effect on that. Okay, so I got that. So I'm Mark right now, and I'm editing all this stuff. Now, so yeah, this is his awesome edit.
Much more enthusiasm than I do.
All right. So this is Mark's edit. Okay, now remember, he's editing with Proxy Media. Okay, but Final Cut thinks it's 4K media, which is great. So now Mark's ready to send it back to me. And by the way, I should point out, and this is a question that keeps coming up, and this is the second thing I want to address. People say, well, why don't you send an XML? Why don't you file and choose export XML? Why don't you send an XML to me? Okay, it's really important that you understand that XML was never designed it was really designed as an edit decision list, where cuts only for handing off your projects to third-party apps like Resolve or Premiere or what have you. It really wasn't designed to maintain the integrity of the project. And the reason is like if I applied effects or if I add audio filters, limiters, and I do some pretty complex stuff, the XML can't track that, and often it just doesn't show up on that end. So what I'm saying is, what you want to send to your editor is a library, and this is another reason why we send what are called small transfer lines. That's why the media is external, because the library file will be really, really tiny. So when he sends a library back to me, he can email it to me, and I'll open it up and I'll have all his edits. There won't be any sort of issues with that project once I get it back on my side. So that's something I just want to clear out. You don't really want to use XML. You want to send libraries. In fact, if I right click on Mark's and I go reveal in Finder, I want you to see that like this library file is 2.8 megabytes. It's tiny because all the media is outside of it. Okay, just wanted to again make that clear. Now, so what Mark's done is he's sent me back his library. So what I would do on my end then is I would probably, now here's my original library, and I'm gonna create a new event. I'm gonna call that Mark Edit. So now I have an event called Mark. By the way, I didn't have to do this, but I did it just for organizational purposes. So I'm gonna take Mark's rough cut. I'm gonna drag it into the Mark Edit event. Now, here's another window. I don't need to copy Proxy Media. Remember, this originated on my system. I already have the media. So all I really need to do is check Project Without Media. So I click OK. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and close Mark's library. Okay, it's done. Mark Edit. Go back here. Open it up. Everything's offline. Oh, wait. No, it isn't. I go back here, and I could say optimize. Oh, there it is. It's reconnecting to the optimized. Now it's connecting to my original online ProRes 4K media from which I generated those proxies. So that's the workflow. Hopefully that cleared up a bunch of things for you. So off to you, Mark.
Steve, that was great. I love that. I'd like to build on what you said a little bit, just because this proxy workflow is so flexible and has so many useful components to it. I'm just going to show a project here on my screen. And the point I want to make here is, if you want to create a proxy-only library because you want to send it to somebody, there's one way to do that, and there's one way not to do it. What you don't want to do is use the consolidate command. Because when you consolidate, it's true, you could consolidate all your proxy media and proxy media only to a specific location, inside the library, outside the library, it doesn't matter. But what won't come with that proxy media are other files that don't support transcoding to proxy. I'm talking about audio, I'm talking about stills, I'm talking about video that has an alpha channel, like ProRes 4x4. All those media types don't support transcoding to proxy, so if you just use consolidate to move proxy files, you won't get those other files. And in the past, you'd have to think through and put those files in, but you don't have to do that anymore. If you use the copy command that Steve did, you get the option to include those. So I just wanted to show you, on the screen here, I have this library called MBS Brooklyn. And if we look in the inspector in the library properties, you can see it's a 6 gigabyte. It's 6 gigabytes in the library. If I scroll to the bottom, we can see the total amount of media is 11 gigabytes. So it's got some stuff inside and some stuff out of the library. You can also see I've created proxy media here that's about 1 gig, okay, much smaller. So I created the proxy media here. I've also created, just like Steve just did, a new empty library called Brooklyn Proxy. So all I'm going to do is take this project. You can see it's here in the timeline. And by the way, this project includes audio, it includes stills, all of these other formats that don't support proxy. I'm just going to drag that project into this other library, and I get that same dialogue that Steve was just talking about so enthusiastically. I only want proxy media, so I'll select that. The key here is this sentence. Steve talked about external, which is very important if you want external. In this case, maybe I just want to put the proxy media inside the library. I just want to make sure it's a package because I'm going to send the package to somebody. The key here is original media that doesn't support transcoding will be copied to the destination library storage location. That means Final Cut's going to say, aha, you want to create a proxy library, but you need the audio files, you need the stills, you need the ProRes 4x4. So it will put them all in there because I'm using the copy operation, not consolidate, but copy. Okay, so I'll just say okay, and it'll do it immediately because these are on the same drives. So if I open that up here, it said, just like Steve said, it's missing media because I am set to right now view as optimized original. But notice what's not missing in this project, right? I've got stills, I've got audio. They don't support proxy, they were included. So they're there, and I could just switch to proxy only to see everything. And then edit and then bring it back the way Steve just showed. So I just wanted to build a little bit on that whole idea because the proxy workflow is great, and it's key that this, you want to use the copy command. And it doesn't have to be a project. You could copy clips or events or entire libraries. You just want to use the copy operation rather than consolidate if you want to include media formats that don't support transcoding to proxy.
Yeah. Awesome. So thanks for that explanation. I want to take a couple of other little smaller questions that I'd like to answer. So I had a question that came in via the survey, and it was basically, well, he wants to purchase a second monitor for use with Final Cut. You know, with Final Cut, you can have your browser or your timeline on a separate display. And the question is, well, what type of monitor should I get? Because you get 1080p, you can get displays with different scaling. I know, like at Costco, you can get 1080p monitors a dime a dozen. Maybe not. Anyway, you get a 1080p monitor. that you can connect via HDMI, and you can run your Final Cut user interface elements on that screen. But here's your question: does it scale it? It'll always scale the UI elements to whatever the resolution is set for your display. So if your display that you bought at Costco is set at 1920 by 1080, that's how it's going to display. If your display supports multiple resolutions, then it will display in the resolution that you have set for that display. So that's my answer to that. Okay. So there's a question about what does an upgrade for 10.5 look like? We don't know. And if we knew, Apple, we wouldn't be able to say anything. So anyway, so we'll move on to the next one. Mark, you want to tee up the next section?
Yeah, I do. So we got a question. It says, excuse my ignorance, but what do you mean by H.264 proxy is only available for SDR material?
Yeah.
And what they're referring to is in our video, we talk about you can use H.264 to make proxies unless you're working with HDR media. And that can be confusing because what do you mean HDR media? Like, anything shot in log is potentially HDR. So I wanted to explain that a little bit. And I have a couple of examples here that explain this. So I'm here in Final Cut, and I have selected this clip that's a ProRes RAW clip. So we're going to look at ProRes RAW, we're going to look at other RAW, and we're going to look at log so you can get a sense of this. So with this ProRes RAW clip, if you look in the inspector at the top here, it's blank under the resolution and the frame rate. This is where the color space usually shows, but RAW doesn't have a color space. It hasn't been encoded to a color space. You can do this log conversion. I won't get into detail working with ProRes RAW right now, except to say this. Some of you may find with your ProRes RAW that you've shot with certain cameras, you're not able to access these changes here, like adjusting exposure or color temperature, and it's only supported by certain cameras. And Steve may have a link there, or I'll post a link that shows what cameras support the ability to change the metadata for ProRes RAW. Okay, I'm going to transcode this clip to proxy. You can also transcode right here in the inspector. See down at the bottom, we say there's original media, there's no proxy. I'll click transcode media. I'm going to choose H.264. I'll click OK. And I get a dialog that says, hey, HDR media doesn't display correctly when transcoded to H.264. That's because H.264 as a codec doesn't support HDR. It won't bake in those values. So what it's going to do is this HDR clips will be transcoded using ProRes proxy. And it actually did it already. Like if I click OK, you can see proxy has been created now for this clip, but it's actually in ProRes. Now, what's so cool is I can select this clip and go into the File menu and say, delete generated clip files. You couldn't do this before. On a clip-by-clip basis, you can delete, well, first of all, you can create proxy or optimized media on a clip-by-clip basis, but then you can also delete on a clip-by-clip basis. So I'm going to delete that proxy media for that clip. And you can see now in the inspector that it's a red triangle, it's gone. So that's ProRes, but let's go, here I have a red clip. And if we look at this red clip in the inspector, we can see that it says it's Rec 2020 PQ, okay? Red can be put into Rec 709 or an HDR format like Rec 2020 PQ or HLG. If I modify my red raw settings here, I could put it in Rec 709 and then I couldn't transcode it to H.264. Or I could, actually, if I put it in Rec 709, then I could because H.264 will work with that. But because this red clip right now is in essentially HDR, I'll have the same issue if I try to transcode it. It will give me the same warning, and it won't let me do it. So now that brings us to log. So here I have a log clip. And if we look at this log clip, it says at the top in the inspector, it's in Rec 709. So if I try to transcode to H.264, it will work because this log clip is already in the Rec 709 color space. However, if I'm in the settings tab in the inspector, by the way, right here. If I go to override the color space and choose, for instance, Rec 2020 PQ, and then I try to transcode that to H.264, I will get that warning. because this log clip is currently in an HDR color space. So that's kind of what it comes down to, is you can transcode red RAW or log encoded clips to H.264 if they're already in the Rec. 709 color space. But if you really want to work in HDR and an HDR library and HDR project for delivering an HDR, then you'll be transcoding to ProRes. So I hope that's made things a little more clear about that.
Okay, so Mark, while you were doing that, some questions came up in the chat about transitions. Like, for example, here, if I have a dissolve placed in the transition as a transition here, and notice up here under cross dissolve in the inspector, I could change things. I can change like ease in and out. I can play with the ease amount. I could change the fade type, because if it's overlapping. By the way, there's your cross dissolve right there. It's always been there. You just had to add it. You just had to add what do you call it? A cross dissolve. Anyway, another matter. So so Mark, so the question is, like, how can I save this as a default? So like the next time I can certainly copy this, but I think the question is, wouldn't it be nice to save this transition with these settings somewhere where I can just keep reapplying them when I open another project? Does that make sense?
Hey, Steve, I don't know if it's happening to anybody else, but you're cutting out a lot for me. Like every other word is cutting out.
Okay.
That's maybe something Travis could look at.
Okay. So the question, I just want to get back to this transition thing. I don't know of a way to save this transition so that it appears in this, let's say, custom. So your custom transition appears here. I think that would be an excellent feature request in the future, because, again, there might be a way to do it, I just don't know. But one thing that you could do, and it's kind of, is you can, I can't even open that. I'd probably make a custom one in Motion, but that's, again, a lot of work. So I'm with you on this, GameSack and Wilson. There needs to be some sort of way to save transitions. By the way, people are saying it's not cutting out for them, so it must be on your end there, buddy.
It must be a Skype.
Must be a Skype thing, Mark.
Okay. I don't know.
All right.
Okay.
So, all right.
I can deal with it.
Okay.
Good. I'm glad it's not cutting out for you folks. Great. Okay. Just related to this sort of original optimized versus proxy, there was a question that said, why has Apple not split the original / optimized to show them separately, is the basic question. It's longer, but it basically says, hey, why in the view pop-up menu is original and optimized combined? And I guess my answer is that it doesn't make sense to me why they'd be separate. I mean, if they were separate and you chose original, and okay, then you just see all your original media and you wouldn't see any optimized media. If you chose optimized and you didn't optimize some clips, then they would show off as offline. So I'm not really sure what the workflow would be that would make sense that you would want to see original clips separate from optimized clips. Normally, if you optimize, that's what you want to work with. That's what you want to see. If it's there, if it's not there, you want to see the original clip. And usually you'll have a mix of those clips, because let's say you're working with a bunch of HEVC clips that you've optimized for better playback performance. And it will also get rid of, by the way, you definitely get some artifacting in HEVC. Shoot some stuff with HEVC on an iPhone, play it back in Final Cut. You're going to see some artifacting. If you optimize it, it'll get rid of that. So you may have optimized HEVC clips next to some other clips that you didn't optimize because they play back fine, and you want to see both at the same time. So to me, it just makes sense that you'd want to see either optimized or original, whatever's optimized if it's available, and if not, show the original, and you'd want to see all that at the same time. That's just my take on that.
Awesome. So Mark, I'm kind of itching to have you show us some of the 3D stuff.
Some 3D stuff?
Yeah.
Sure. So I'll just, one question was wondering if it's possible to create your own 3D objects for easily importing into Motion. And the answer is yes. Any 3D models that you buy or find for free or create yourself can be brought into Motion as long as they're in the USDZ format. And if they aren't, there's many 3D formats. You can convert them to USDZ. It's more than I can get into here. I'm working on a full-blown tutorial on how to do all this in detail. but I will show you a little bit
By the
about
way, you
this to
should
answer some
probably
of the
tell them
questions.
you're working on a full media management tutorial as well. So a lot
Oh
of the
yeah,
things that
I
we're
mean,
showing.
yeah, very deep, and hopefully this will be out in the next couple of weeks here, getting very close, about halfway through. Updating our media management tutorial to go into detail about how to do all these workflows, not just proxy-only workflows, but how to archive a project, really understanding when you consolidate, how to consolidate media. Just, it's stuff you've got to know to work with Final Cut, so you don't end up with media all over your drives, or you're filling up drives. I just had somebody say, hey, I don't understand. I imported 10 gigabits into my library. Now it's 200 gigabytes. What's going on? So just trying to address that kind of stuff. Yeah, so let's switch gears radically and talk a little bit about motion here. So I'm in motion, and I have this 3D scene. I have this little plane flying over this castle.
That's so awesome.
And it is a full 3D scene. These are objects that I downloaded. I didn't build them myself, but you can see I can zoom in, I can pan around. You can see they interact with each other, like that car is behind that pole there or in front. So 3D objects can kind of interact with each other. I can go all the way into this little courtyard and look around in the courtyard. If I select an object, I'll rotate around that object. So I'll select the castle, and then I can, look around inside that castle. And this is a fairly simple model. You can get very complex models and kind of create scenes. I put a little bit of a 2D plane on the background here, and I added a blue background here. I just did something simple. By default, these 3D objects don't cast shadows. I did a little bit of trickery to get the shadow on the plane here by basically creating a clone, which can create some other problems, but it fakes it. And I also did a little shadow on the car by adding a little, blurred shape down there. I just wanted to show you kind of how you can mix and match these models in motion. And I also want to show you, sorry, let me bring up this window here. Where I got these models is from a site called Sketchfab. And if you've seen our video, you know about this already. But Sketchfab is a great resource for 3D models because all of them can be downloaded directly in the USDZ format. And if you go to Sketchfab and you do a search for Ripple Training, we've created a curated collection of models that have been verified to work in motion. So you can see we've got buildings and vehicles and places. And some of these are really pretty amazing models. Some of them are free and some of them you purchase, but they're all kind of really incredible because you just click on any of these guys. This is $25 and it needs to load, but you can inspect it here and see what the whole thing will look like. And if you choose to download, you just download in the USDZ format and you can bring these things into Motion. And from Motion, you can publish them to Final Cut. And they'll be available in Final Cut. Now, there are some limitations. I mean, I feel like this is kind of a first rev of this functionality because you can bring in these models, you can scale them and animate them with keyframes. You can even light them to a certain extent. There's default lighting, but if I add actually I have a light here. So if I go to the project, I can turn off the default lighting for the 3D environment. I've actually brought it down already. So the 3D environment looks like that. I can bring that down, and now I'm just lit by my light, this is basically a directional light that I've added to the scene. And you can see that it reacts to that light. So you can light these models, you can animate them around, and you can export them. You can save them by publishing to Final Cut and have access to them in Final Cut. People have been asking a lot of things about this, like, can I texture them? The answer is no, you can't texture them in Motion. Motion just sees the USDZ as a single object. And that's actually a benefit of the USDZ format. It's entirely self-contained. Many 3D models have all these separate texture files and bit displacement files and specular and highlight. There's a ton of files that can easily get unlinked, so you don't have access to them. But UZZ is a single package file, so you'll never lose that stuff and you have access to it. So really what I'm going to do in the tutorial is go into like, okay, well, if you want to texture it, how do you do that? You know, what resources are there available to do this kind of stuff before you bring it into Motion and then send it to Final Cut. And it's awesome. I love this. I think this is a really cool new feature in Motion that folks in Final Cut will be using as well.
All right. I like how you, have a biplane flying over the castle in a 60s muscle car parked out front.
I know, it really makes sense, right?
I just thought that was just awesome there. All right.
So not very logical.
Yeah. So what I'd like to do is maybe jump back to some of the questions. And I just want to remind everybody that you could still post questions in the chat. We are monitoring the chat. So when Mark's demoing, I'm monitoring the chat. And when I'm demoing, Mark's monitoring the chat. And we're going to do our best to try to get to all the questions. We may not get to all of them. We'll do our best. I'm also answering questions specifically that were sent in ahead of time vis-a-vis our email. We send out surveys. By the way, if you want to be on our email list, you could just go to our website and you can join. And we send out regular messages about new tutorials and things that we're doing. So anyway. That said, what I want to do is get back to these kind of pre-delivered questions. So I want to talk a little bit, I guess, about overlays for a moment and how they work. I'm gonna read the question specifically. So when I turn my head, I'm actually reading the question here. So this question is: Good morning. Can you show a bit on creating custom overlays similar to TitleSafe for use when editing, specifically creating a vertical Instagram TV overlay? Is it possible to view video that is the outside of the bounds of the current frame window? I.e., if I put a 3840 by 2160 video in a 1920 by 1080 storyline and have spatial conform set to none, is there a way to see what's outside the window? So the answer to that question is yes. So what I'm going to do is cut to my screen over here. Let's see here. I'm going to go into my projects. I'm going to open up. Okay, so here I have a project of my niece Denise and her dog Dozer in Sedona. And it was shot with the iPhone at 4K, and there's some drone clips at 1080. But anyway, what I want to do is output this to Instagram or maybe even TikTok as a vertical video. So this new feature is really handy. This is a little thing that makes a huge difference to me in terms of workflow. So if I right click on the project icon, this new feature, duplicate project as. And what's great here is I could choose a target format to copy those clips into. And what I'll do here is I'm going to select vertical. And if you watch my demo, you could choose the resolution. In this case, I'm going to actually, what I'm going to do this a little bit differently. Instead of vertical, I'm going to choose HD, and I'll tell why in a second. So I'm not going to make a vertical video. I'm going to take this 4K project, copy the 4K clips into a 1080 version, and one of the reasons I want to do that is then I have all that extra resolution to deal with when panning and zooming and what have you. So I'm going to choose 1080, HD, 1920, and I'm going to change the name of the project to HD so I know what that is when I create it. So I'm going to click OK. All right, so now I have this HD project, and I'm going to open it by double clicking. Okay, so now I have this HD project open. Now I'm going to zoom out a little bit on the canvas so you can see outside the frame boundaries. And one of the things that I talked about is why you would do this is now this is a 4K clip. So when I turn on the overlay, when I turn on the the transforms, and then I go over to the inspector, and I could choose under type, I could choose none. Now I've kind of punched into the center of that 4K clip, and I'm gonna have to zoom out a little bit because you can't see there. You can see all the boundaries here. So you can see I have all this resolution from which to pan and zoom and what have you within that 1080 timeline. But the question was, it's like, I want to be able to see outside the boundary so I know what I'm doing. Well, that's what this little button here is for. Is this new now? I can now turn this button on. I can see all the pixels outside of my working resolution. Now, this will still work with your overlays. This is fantastic. Is like, I still want to see this relative to what my vertical output would be. So you could go to the view menu, and by the way, I discovered this is a little thing I discovered. If I go to show custom overlay and I choose square, there it says square, but I have to sometimes have to go back and refresh this. So now I choose vertical. So now you can see that I have my vertical overlay, and what's nice about this is I can now move my 4K frame around the viewer, and I can see it not only relative to the 1080 frame, but I can see it relative to the vertical frame. So I get the best of both worlds here. So that's really helpful. So you can bring up an overlay even when working, we were working in different resolutions. So hope that answered that question for you. Back to you, Mark. Is Mark still there? Did he disappear?
Maybe he's not here.
Maybe.
Sorry, I did it. It's my fault. I muted myself because I was going to sneeze. So I wanted to thank, actually, everybody who's made a contribution. I want to thank very much. I wanted to address Bits to Pics, made a contribution, very much appreciated, and ask a question.
Hey, Mark, switch back to your camera.
Yes. What?
Switch back to your camera.
Oh, hi there. Bits to Pics, I wanted to address your questions. Thank you for the contribution. He said, I need help in choosing a low-cost MacBook Air or Pro 13-inch for traveling in RV. Simple editing, cuts, crops, titles, and speed. Media is 4 5K drone, GoPro 360 output at 2K. Nothing simple about that. If you're doing 4K, 5K, and you're doing drone footage, which is not just H.264, it's also difficult to work with, I find I often need to optimize my drone footage. I'd really recommend you get a MacBook Pro. I would not try to do it on an Air. You're going to be frustrated. I would get a MacBook Pro, not an Air, not a MacBook, but a MacBook Pro, and I would get as much RAM as you can and a better graphics card. The CPU is not as important, but you're going to hit your limit. So get a MacBook Pro. You really want to. That's my opinion on that. I wanted to address another motion-related question.
Yep.
That said, let me just find it here. Yeah, he said, I'm trying to create a virus educational video illustrating how when people speak, they release droplets in the air. Some of these droplets fall to the ground, but others float in the air. And I know I can do it with a particle emitter, but I don't know exactly how to make some things drop and some things stay high. So what I thought I would do, I'm going to switch back to my screen here. And I'm still on my car because I just love this Chevrolet parked by the castle. I just think that's hilarious. But I have another project here. Actually, I'll mention this briefly while I'm here because I think this is worth mentioning. 3D objects, as you've already seen, can interact with each other. In other words, here I have a bowling pin and a basketball, and I can move the basketball in front of the bowling pin or the bowling pin in front of the basketball. So that's what I mean by interacting, or in fact, you can, put one inside another 3D object. They will actually go right inside each other. You can see they're inside each other. However, just another thing to be aware of, if you're working with 3D text, I've added some text here, and that all looks great. It's right in front of everything, but if I turn it all the way around, the text stays in front. Okay, because 3D text is a different animal than these 3D objects. So it stays in the layer stacking order, which in this case, my text is in the top. So you're not going to be able to wrap, 3D text to wrap around these 3D objects without doing a little bit of workarounds. I just wanted to mention that because, that'll come up in there. So, but here, rather than doing droplets, because that's gross and depressing, but very important, I thought I'd use basketballs. So what I did is I created an emitter out of a single point that's throwing out basketballs. And you can see these are 3D basketballs that are bouncing. And the way that I did this, here I can rotate the camera around. You can see that they're spread out in 3D space as they're doing this. But what I did is I added gravity to the emitter to make the basketballs fall. If I turn that gravity off, they disappear because they're actually all, let me put Shift V, so you can see they're all way up, flying through the air now.
That's great.
They're just flying, right? But I turn gravity on, they come down and they bounce because I have this edge collision turned on. And I have it pretty low. If I turn that bounce strength up, they'll just fly completely, off the screen again, or I can turn it down really low and they'll just kind of hit and they're like dead basketballs and roll away. So that's how to make objects fall, is with gravity. And you generally need to crank up the gravity quite a bit until it has the effect you want. So, if you turn the gravity down, they won't fall quite as much, or you can turn it up and they'll fall very quickly to the ground. And then edge collisions makes them bounce. And that user wasn't interested in edge collision, but it's mainly gravity. And then if you want some particles not to fall to the ground, what I would do is have two emitters. So you duplicate the emitter, and then you have one version where don't have gravity on it. I think you could do that simulation of talking or sneezing, whatever, and just don't use basketballs. Use a little blur particle or something from Motion's library for the particle. So just another example that you can use these 3D objects in Motion with replicators and particle emitters and do a lot of great fun stuff. By the way, I did make them spin by adding some spin to the basketballs themselves. If I just go to the emitter, you see there's in the emitter inspector, I've added some spin some spin and spin randomness to have them spin around. So there you go.
Yeah, if only we were spewing basketballs. Anyway, so so I want to get back to some questions. I just want to remind everybody, chat's here. Mark and I, the doctors are in. We can take your questions here. We're continuing to answer questions off of our spreadsheet from questions that were sent in ahead of time. And if you want to super chat, click the little button and your question will go right to the top. By the way, those of you who have super chat us, want to thank you for that. All right, so I'm going to get into the next question that was asked relative to the conform feature. So what I want to talk a little bit about, well, I'll just read the question. Question is, where is it? I almost lost the question here. Oh, here it is. Reframing for social media. You recall that in my video, I had a vertical project and the subject Denise walked outside of the vertical, so I had to keyframe her to keep her in the middle of the vertical frame. And you recall that if I animated the anchor point to do that. So the question was related, well, why would you use the anchor point? Why wouldn't you just animate the position and not the anchor point? Which one's better? So I'm going to show you why anchor point is better than position. So let's go in here. I'm going to go back to Final Cut. And here I have that same project that I looked at earlier. Okay, now let's say that I wanted to zoom to Denise, put her in that recorder and zoom in. Okay, so if I used position, I want you to see this. I'm just going to go ahead. I have to move her where I want her. It's like move her here. Or maybe I want her in the center. Maybe I want her, like, move her into position, and then I would start scaling her. Oh, she's not quite in the center. I better move her down. Scale again. Oh, she's not quite in the center. I better scale her down. Don't like this. I'm going to reset that. So this is why I don't like position, and you'll see why in a moment. So I'm going to reset that. Now, the anchor point is really important to understand because when you work with transforms in Final Cut, everything happens around the anchor point. So rotation, scale, and everything. And right now the anchor point is dead center, and that's where all of the transforms are happening. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to move that anchor point. I'm going to just say, you know what? I'm going to move the anchor point right there, and I'm going to use the Y scrubber, and I'm going to put that anchor point right on top of Denise and her dog. Okay? Now what's great about this is now when I scale, I don't have to worry about repositioning her because it's scaling based on the anchor point. So that is my answer to why you should use position instead, anchor point instead of position. Awesome. So I hope you like that one. All right, back to you, Mark.
Sure. So Here's a question. After upgrading to 10.4.9, a message appeared stating Canon Raw is no longer supported. What's the story and workaround? So the story is the Canon Raw Light plugin needs to be updated for Canon Raw clips to work in 10.4.9. I have heard that that should be out next week. I can't verify that. I heard somebody else talk to Canon support, and Canon support told them that that should be out next week. So the workaround is to stay in 10.4.8. I will also add, if you're working with red footage, and I'll bring this up on the screen in just a second here. If you're working with red footage, there's a red workflow installer that I have up on my screen right now. You can see release date was August 25th, and you want to update that to see your red clips. That's available now, and I will copy this link and put it in our chat window so you guys have the link directly. There it is. So I've also heard, just while on the topic, several people talk about Sony FX7 and 9 having issues with MXF files. I don't know more about that than I've heard some people having issues with that, but I don't have that media type here to test directly. Okay,
do you have another tip, Mark? Do you want to go to the questions here?
Let me just see. There's a question, what's your overall workflow for Proxy Media? So there's so many options depending on what you need to do with Proxy Media. It's really, we gave a couple of demos of a proxy-only library. I would say check out our multimedia, our media management tutorial that goes into depth on how to work with Proxy Media with some specific examples about how to do that.
Okay. What's that? What's that? Oh yeah, switch back to your camera, sir.
Oh yeah, thank you. I got to remember to do that. I'll get better at it.
Yeah, he has this really awesome black magic switcher. He just goes doot, 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 and
yep.
It's really great. All right, a couple of questions, smaller ones that I can answer. So one question that came up: I have a Mac Pro mid 2010 computer with High Sierra operating system, version 10.13.6. I could not update it to Mojave or Catalina because of my video card. Please advise me how I would be able to update my Mac, my Final Cut Pro Tower to the new version. Well, you're not going to like my answer, but you have a Mac that's 10 years old, and it's time to upgrade. It just is. I don't know of anything you could do to your Mac. Maybe there's somebody in the chat could say this is what I did, but I mean, 10 years is an eternity in the tech world, and the software has changed so radically in 10 years that it's just not worth it. It's time to get a new computer. It just is. So that's my answer to that one. Okay.
Hey, I'm going to answer a question posted here. This is from David Allen Boyd, who actually is a friend up the road here. Hey, David, really glad to see you here on not see you, but see your text on the program here. So he asked, with Motion 3D functionality, is it possible to overlay a drone video with a 3D model using drone telemetry to guide the motion camera? The short answer is no. The longer answer is that Motion VFX, our friend Simon, who runs the company motionvfx.com, has announced a product called M-Tracker 3D. And if you haven't seen the demo yet, it's pretty outstanding. Yep. What that M-Tracker 3D does is it tracks 3D footage. It tracks in 3D space. So you could put flat footage, but it's really made to take 3D text and 3D models and track them into a scene. And that is supposed to be coming out in Q4. I believe he's taking pre-orders for it next week in September. And so I really look forward to that. Yeah. And you should look forward to a tutorial from us on how to take advantage of that, because that really takes its 3D capability to a whole new level when you can track 3D models into a video clip, basically. It's very exciting. So definitely stay tuned for that.
Yeah. All right, cool. Awesome. So another question came up about LUTs, lookup tables. So the question was, if you shot, is there a LUT that you can apply in Apple ProRes to the Nikon Z series? Well, there is no Nikon built-in LUT in Final Cut, but you can always import whatever LUT you want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this link and see, hopefully we'll see this here. But if you just want to cut to this, Travis, basically I'm on Nikon's website. You can download the Nlog 3D LUT right from their site and import it into Final Cut Pro 10. So you do have a Nikon LUT that you can use. As a matter of fact, for those who want the link, here it is. I'm pasting it in the chat for you Nikon folks. And there, go get your LUT. Okay.
So I'm just answering a question here. Let's see, does Ripple Training have any lower thirds plugin packages for sale? Not right now, but they're all really reasonable. You can check out all our plugins at rippletraining.com. And if you have more questions about them, please shoot us an email, support@rippletraining.com. We'd be glad to help you out with that.
Yeah. Yep.
Go ahead.
No, there's a question about plugins. RM Productions asked about M glitch not showing up. I'm trying to blank. Motion VFX has their thing called the M installer. Let me see it. Just to move this out of the way.
Yep.
So they have their M installer, and one thing that's nice about that is that you can. There is a way that you can like delete the plugin and then reinstall it, and that's what I've done to solve a lot of this. Is that I thought there was like a button.
Hamburger menu.
Was it?
Right.
Is it the hamburger menu?
Try that.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought there's a way to actually uninstall what you've done. Well, I guess that's what I'm saying is you delete that plugin from M installer and then reinstall it and see if that makes the problem
You're checking
go away.
one that's installed.
What's that?
You're checking one that's not installed.
Yeah, one
Check
that's
the
not.
installed
Oh,
one.
oh, that's right. Thank you, Travis. See, I have M Puppet here. I don't have it installed on my computer, but notice if I click the hamburger menu, it'll say uninstall. So there you go. Cool.
Why do you call that a hamburger menu? I'm just curious.
Because we'll look at it. It's got two. It's got a bun on the top and the bottom. In the center, it's got a hamburger.
Yeah.
It's a hamburger menu. That's a hamburger menu.
It's a question from Pablo Rojas, and Pablo, I pronounced your name correctly. How much can I scale a 4K video on a 1080 project without losing quality? 200%.
Yep.
Because it's 1080s is actually a quarter of the resolution overall of 4K, but if you do 200%, you're scaling in and exactly matching the pixel for pixel resolution. That's the answer. You can actually go a little over 200%. You'll start to lose some quality, but it's probably not noticeable. But if you want to be safe, 200%.
Awesome. All right. Looks like we're.
And you guys, by the way, so I will say it's 12. We usually stop now, but if you still got questions, we'll go a little while longer. If we didn't get to your question, just post it again because they're way back and it's hard to scroll back and find them. So just post them again, and we'll answer them, and we'll stay as long as there's some other questions. We'll happy to answer them for a little bit longer here.
Yeah, within reason. No.
Yeah.
It's 2 hours answering questions.
A few more minutes.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going through my questions here that were sent in ahead of time, and we pretty much answered all of them. There was a question about multicam angles and color balancing using the magic wand. I don't have a demo. If you have a multicam clip, with 3 or 4 angles, you should be able to open the angle editor by double clicking on a clip and select just that angle and color correct just that angle. You could select it and then use the auto balance, and you can auto balance that entire angle. So it's just a matter of stepping into the multicam clip and applying your color correction to the angle. It's as simple as that.
I'll add a little bit to that. What's tricky is if you open up the angle editor and select that angle, if there's a lot of changes over that angle, if the camera went outside, went inside, applying a single automatic color balance to a whole clip where there's changing conditions isn't going to work well. It's just not. What you could do though is you could blade that angle where there's a change in scene or lighting, and then color balance each of those sections separately. You could attack it that way. There was one question, this is kind of interesting. I'm very interested in Motion's new 3D object capabilities. However, I'm really interested if it'll open up any creative potential for typography. Can you see new applications to titles, typography using these 3D objects? For instance, mapping the surfaces of the objects with a text layer or any other features. Mapping the surfaces of objects with a text layer. It'd be great to know about how to do this. Not really sure what they mean by that, but just to get back to what you were saying, 3D objects can't be textured directly in Motion, but text, 3D text, absolutely can be textured in Motion in a very, very deep way, including your own custom textures. In fact, we have a $20 plugin called Ripple Drops that lets you add any of your own photographs, video, whatever, to texture 3D text. So you can check that out. So 3D text is completely, and has been, texturable in Motion for years, and it's outstanding. And in Final Cut, by the way, all of those 3D text features are all available directly in Final Cut Pro as well.
Yeah, cool.
Sorry, I was just going to say, we've had probably 5 times people have asked the exact same question about how do I use Blackmagic BRAW in Final Cut. And the answer is that Final Cut doesn't currently support native BRAW in Final Cut Pro. It just doesn't. That's between Apple and Blackmagic, there's nothing we can add to that, except that if you want to use BRAW in Final Cut right now, you're going to need to export ProRes of those clips and work with it in ProRes. I also wish that you could work with it natively, but that's just not currently the case.
Yeah, I don't see, I shoot a lot of BRAW, so I just open and resolve, adjust my metadata settings, send them all over to the deliver page, and spit them out as ProRes
422 or?
Yeah, and I usually 422. Thank you, 422, and they basically they're log encoded. So basically, I actually never. Let me back that up. I generally don't, unless I really need to adjust, the ISO and whatnot. I'll generally just take that flat log encoding, just spit them out as ProRes, and so they stay in that log format when I get to Final Cut, and then apply a LUT or use the color wheels to adjust it. It's an extra step for sure, but it certainly doesn't prevent me from using a camera in any way. It doesn't prevent me from using any of the footage I shoot with that camera.
There's a question here, well, with the new update to Final Cut, are you going to update your punch-in plugin? And they're referring to RT Plunch-ins. Right. And no, we're not going to update it because it works perfectly. I've been using it extensively in building this media management tutorial in 10.4.9. All our plugins work in 10.4.9 as is. There's nothing needs to be updated at all. And I personally, RT Punch-ins is right now my favorite plugin of ours, or of anybody's actually, just because I'm using it all the time. It's so easy to do quick zoom-ins on user interface and zoom out and pan over and what have you. So no need for an update.
Okay, awesome. So this is your last chance to put in your questions. We're about ready to wrap up the show. I'd like to show one more tip, Mark, if you wouldn't mind. This came up.
Please go for it.
So this comes up, and this thing is, I'll put this out for you who are watching if you guys have a workaround. I have my own workaround, but let's say I'm going to share this as a master file. So I'm going to take that clip file, share, and I'm going to say master file. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add metadata in here. I'm going to type in Sedona, dog, hiking, right? These are all tags that are going to go up with the movie to Vimeo or YouTube, so I don't have to do it on there, right? So I'm adding all these tags. I might even change the title to a hike. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to settings, and I'm just going to spit out a H.264 version of this to the desktop. Well, actually, no. Let me put audio and video. Click next, and I'll just save that to the desktop. So I'm going to let that do its thing right now. Now, I need to make a change and re-output this thing again. Okay, great. I made a change. I moved a title around. I did something, but I want to re-output it. File, share, master file. This is the point. It doesn't remember any of that stuff I put in there. All the tags, everything. I have to re-enter them. And I think that was one of the questions I got. That's frustrating to have to do every single time. And I agree. I think Apple should Final Cut should just remember whatever metadata you put in from the last time. All right. So what my workaround is, and then feel free to chime in here, is that I'll go into list view. I know this is kind of a silly workaround, but it works for me. So I'm going to find the name column. Let me see if I can find it. Or is it right click, and it's called the where is it? Notes. No, okay, notes are on. So what I end up doing is I use the notes column. For some reason, gotta find notes. Oh, there it is. So what I'll do is use this notes column, and I keep losing it. Sorry guys. Let me back up here. Oh, there it is. I resized it. So what I'll do is double click into this notes field. Come on, there we go. And for some reason, Final Cut's not behaving right now. We go. Come on. Sometimes it takes a minute for the input field to show up, but this is frustrating. I'm sorry about this. But my whole point was to choose the project, go to the notes field, and let's say double click. I'm going to use the tab key instead. See what happens. There we go. Tab. So what I'll do is I'll type in my metadata here. I'll type in Denise, comma, Sedona, comma, I don't know, dog, comma, and it's always stored with the notes. Always. So that I'll type it here, select that, copy it, so that when I'm ready to share the video, I'm saying master file, because I put it in the notes field, boom, oops, should have copied it. But basically what I'm doing is copying the tags out of the notes field. Let's see, for some reason it didn't. There we go, copy. All right, let's try it one more time. It's just, of course it worked for me when I did it first time. And select the tag, delete, Command V. There, notice the tags that I put in the notes field have now been pasted. I know that's a workaround and it's kind of silly that I have to do that, but that's my personal workaround to make sure that I don't have to retype those tags every single time. So that was my tip.
Awesome. Hey, there's a question that kind of brings up something that I think I'd like to show briefly. He's Four Cards Man said, I was considering using Final Cut as a database for still photos since it has such strong metadata. If I import in RAW, can I export in RAW? So I wouldn't recommend using Final Cut as a database for still photos. I just think there's better solutions for that. And I wanted to show KeyFlow Pro 2 for that reason. So I have it up on the screen here. This is KeyFlow Pro 2. And so KeyFlow Pro is it's a media asset management system, which some people want to use. You can do media asset management inside Final Cut, but there can be some advantages to doing it in an external application. And the cool thing about this application is its integration with Final Cut. So you can bring, thousands of assets into this, video, stills, audio, whatever. You can tag them as favorites. You can add keywords. You can rate them. And then when you're done, you can select clips. Watch, if I right click, I can choose send to Final Cut Pro 10. It'll also create proxies in here. So actually, before I show that, let me just show you in preferences for this, for the encoder, when you import, say I create preview file during import. So what this means is with 10.4.9, Final Cut supports proxies created in third-party applications. And if you haven't seen it, Steve does an amazing demo in the video of what's new, where he takes proxies and in Compressor, he creates the proxies in Compressor instead of Final Cut because he can apply a LUT to those proxies because they're log footage, so the proxies look great. And it's created in Compressor, and then back in Final Cut, there's a new relink proxies command, which is awesome. It'll relink to proxies created in Compressor. It will relink to proxies created in Frame.io. So if you uploaded a whole bunch of media to Frame.io as lower resolution proxies, you can connect to those directly in Final Cut. And the same here in KeyFlow Pro, when I send this thing to Final Cut, I can send original and preview files, and those will immediately, I'll just do it, those will immediately appear. I can put them in an existing library or a new library, and I'll just do a new library. So I just say send, and those clips immediately appear in here. And if you look over in the right side here, there's proxy representation. So if I switch my view to proxy only, you can still see them because there's proxies of all these clips created, plus all the metadata, all the the keywords, the favorites, all comes through. So this ability to support third-party created proxies is really great.
It goes silent when we're answering questions in the chat.
We're looking through these here. There's been a lot of new questions.
Yeah. Did we miss any? We're just going back up. There's a question about the free eyeball. Did you see the question about the free eyeball, Mark?
The free what?
Eyeball. He said, Michael Jones says, I imported a free eyeball from Sketch. How do I get it to spin?
Sketchfab, no, I didn't.
Recorded the movement with HUD. It must be a better way.
Recorded the movement with yeah, definitely a better way. I mean, you can use parameter behaviors. You could have a rate behavior to have it rotate around. You can use an oscillate behavior to have the eyeball oscillate back and forth. You've got to get into parameter behaviors. They are the best in motion, and they're great for 3D objects. Video Beauty is asking about how to override the magnetic timeline. Yeah. And I told him how with the P key, but anytime anybody wants to override the magnetic timeline, I'm a little suspect. Sometimes there's just something that you need to do that makes it easier by overriding, but sometimes people want to override the magnetic timeline because they haven't learned the power of it yet. Yeah. And once they start bypassing it, they never get the power of it, and they're just fighting Final Cut the whole time. So I'd really recommend a little bit of training on how to take advantage of that magnetic timeline. If you, let's see, who asked the question? Video Beauty, yeah. If you haven't done it yet, Steve's got a free 10 lesson series of Introduction to Final Cut that's directly linked from Apple's Final Cut Pro 10 resource page that you could check out. And if you want to go deeper, his core training at rippletraining.com will really help you understand the power of magnetic timeline and not fighting it. You do have to get used to it. Anybody who comes from any other editor struggles with that at first and finds it frustrating because it's a different way of thinking. But anybody here will tell you once they've gone through that door, there's no going back. You will become in love with the magnetic timeline. Yeah, Dofre, agreed. We should do a dedicated video about KeyFlow Pro in relation to Final Cut. Agreed. I think that's a great idea. There's a lot of things we should cover. The Frame.io, if you guys haven't seen it yet, Patrick Southern, who a good friend of ours and who's now an employee of Frame.io, did an excellent video. I think it's only about 7 minutes that takes you through the new Frame.io features, including the integration with Final Cut and the proxy workflow, and I highly recommend checking that out.
Awesome. All right. So, hey, Masu, I'm sorry if this has been asked for the 100th time. I am SV10 editor, and now should I go with Apple Motion or After Effects for getting into visual effects? I'll let you handle that one, Mark.
Yeah, I'm going to do, this could be a longer conversation, hey, Masu, but the short answer is, if you want to work with Final Cut Pro, you're going to want to work with Motion because of the integration. Motion is faster and easier to work with than After Effects. It has better real-time performance. Mm-hmm. You can do a lot. If you're going to do anything in visual effects in general, you're going to want to work in After Effects. If you're working outside the Final Cut ecosystem, After Effects is much more well established in that general environment. And for visual effects, After Effects has a deeper tool set. Motion, as its name implies, is a little more oriented toward motion graphics than it is visual effects. So if you're deep into visual effects, After Effects has a deeper tool set, a bigger community, and if you want to do it as a living, it's something you need to know how to do. But in Final Cut world, Motion can do I'd probably say 80 to 90% of what you need to get done, you can do in motion for basic visual effects and motion graphics for your editorial projects.
Yep. Okay. So do you have any? There's a question from Scramble the Seawolves about advanced KeyFlow Pro over Kino. Do you have any comments on those?
I'm just not familiar with Kino. That's my only, so I can't speak to that. It could be better, so that's my answer. Sorry.
Okay, cool. So it looks like we're coming to the end of our questions. A couple things. One is, let's see if I can find it here. One is, we're running a couple of specials right now on our website. We have a tutorial on 360 video editing and 3D titles and masks. They're both $10. So we regularly cycle out our tutorials. These tutorials are regular $60 and they're $10 each. So if you're interested in 3D or dipping your toes into the world of VR on 360, there you have it. And then we have something working with titles and Final Cut. So wanted to point that out. So as we mentioned earlier, we're kind of deep in the throes of working on creating some brand new content for you guys, particularly with the media management and Mark's forthcoming 3D models USDZ tutorial. This content takes a lot of time to create. We put a lot of heart and soul into it. All of our tutorials are tightly scripted, and people seem to appreciate that. We don't waste time. We just get right into here's the steps. We provide the media. In fact, all our tutorials are like that. You have the media, and we just no fluff. We get right to business, and our Ripple player is really great because you can actually put notes and comments in it, and you can put flags and markers in. So it's a really great experience. Plus, any tutorial you get, you could also download them local. So if you go on a trip, you don't have access to internet, you could watch your tutorials on your iPad, on your iPhone, or whatever. If you want to transfer them using, it's not even iTunes, using Apple Music. Anyway, so just wanted to bring that to your attention. So, Mark, anything else?
Yeah, I just want to mention for folks who may not know it, we do a ton of free content almost every day on our YouTube channel.
Yep.
So you want to go there. We have a series of 60-second tips that we've been doing now for a couple of months. It's been really popular, and we're continuing to do those. So look for those, as well as MacBreak Studio. And I just want to thank people for, when you buy our plugins and you buy our tutorials, that supports our ability to do a free show like this, or all the other free content that we put out on our YouTube channel on a regular basis. So I just want to say thank you, because supporting us lets us do all of this, and we greatly appreciate it.
Yes, we do. So we know your time is valuable. Thank you for spending the past hour and 20 minutes with us. We really appreciate it. We monitor our channel frequently, so we interact with comments and what have you. You can also, if you have specific questions related to things, we have a support email on our website, support@rippletraining.com. We try to get to those if you're stuck. And plus, we also do one-on-one live consulting over Zoom. That particular option is a paid option, however. But if you need some build something specific, and you need some help from Mark, or you need some help with workflow, we could schedule a one-on-one Zoom meeting with you, and you can check that out on our website. So thank you. And I really want to give a shout out to Travis over here. He's our lead editor and our tech guy. He does an amazing job. He's the guy that did our A10 mini tutorial. So I could not do this. We couldn't do the show without him. So yay, Travis.
Thank you, Travis.
So thank you, Travis. So again, wanted to thank you guys for tuning in. We really appreciate it. Thank you, and hopefully we'll do another MacBreak Live soon. So thanks again for watching. We'll see you guys next time.
See you guys. Thank you.